So you're playing against and you do a 10 pull, and while you don't get a 5-star, you do get 4-star Iansan. Now, what do you get with Iansan besides a character that I actually thought was going to be a 5-star? Well, Iansan is a polearm wielding Electro user who can buff your team very, very well and even do a little bit of healing. Not quite like Benny, but it is still some healing. And in this video, we're going to look at the basics of Iansan. Now, first, we're going to look at Iansans' normal attacks. Now, they do have a kind of cool animation, but that's not really it. Her charge attack is going to be the corkscrew version of this charge attack, at least in this form. If we use her skill, she is going to dash forward, dealing electro damage, as well as giving her some Night Soul Blessing points and putting her in this state, or in her Night Soul state, where she is going to run much faster. Now, she does have a couple of changes now that she is in this form. If you dash, she's going to be able to run on top of water, kind of like Veressa, but nowhere near as long as Veressa. And if you do a charged attack in this form, she's going to actually kind of jump up and do a tiny little plunging attack that is going to do AoE electro damage. Now, real quick, we are going to look at her passives before we get into her burst. Now, if we look at her first passive, it's going to be very, very important because this is going to work with kind of how her buffing mechanic works. After Swift Storm Flight hits opponents, which is going to be kind of her plunging attack, Iansan will gain the precise movement effect. During this time, her attack is increased by 20%, and then whenever she regains a Night Soul's point through the mechanics of her burst, she will gain an extra Night Soul point, which is going to be important because we need to keep her Night Soul points kind of full, or at least above a certain threshold. Additionally, when your current active party member consumes or restores their own Night Soul points, the extra Night Soul points that she gains is going to be increased even more. Her second passive is going to be whenever nearby party members trigger the Night Soul's burst, which can happen every so often, but the more Natlan characters you have in your party, the more often it will trigger. She will obtain the warming up effect, which she will restore. When Iansan restores at least one Night Soul's point, she will heal your active party member. This can happen every 0.28 seconds, which is the same cooldown time as her other passive. So this is where the little bit of healing comes in. So now we're going to look at her burst. Now, her burst is going to do an instance of pyro damage, but it's also going to trigger her buffing effect. Now, what this buffing effect is going to do is going to give an attack buff to your character, but it's going to do it dependent on how many Night Souls points she has or has used. And we need to make sure that we have enough. You see this little mark next to Kazuha with the face and the double exclamation points? That means that we are at full effect of this buff. If it is this icon on the screen, it means that we are not getting the full buffing effect. We are getting the lesser version of it. We are not going to get nearly as much attack buff with this icon. We need to make sure that we get her above a certain amount of Night Souls points, so that way we can get the full effect of the buff, getting the double exclamation point marker instead of the regular one. So not only will Iansan gain Night Souls points based on the other characters in your party getting Night Souls points, but she will also log the distance in which your characters move during her burst, as long as it's not her, any character but her. And every 1 second, it will restore a certain amount of Night Soul points to Iansan based on how much distance she has moved. So in this team that we are running with Raiden, it's actually not super great because Raiden doesn't move a lot. However, Veressa does, which is one of the reasons why Iansan is so good with Veressa, because you're going to be moving around a lot whenever it comes to Veressa, with how you use her skill and kind of how you move over to enemies to then do plunging and all of this stuff. You get a lot more movement in Veressa than somebody like Raiden. But I wanted to show you a good example being Veressa and a not so good example of Raiden being the moving mechanic that is built into the burst. So Iansan does really, really well whenever you have multiple Natlan characters in your team, so that way you can have the Night Souls points going to her, allowing for her to keep that buff up longer. Now, for artifacts, her best artifact set is going to be Cinder City. If you have another Cinder City party user in this team that you're going to be using her in, and they need it more than her, then you can use Noblesse if you don't have another Noblesse user instead of Cinder City. For the main stacks, you're going to be wanting to get as much attack as possible, so you're going to be running attack across the board or an ER Sands if you need extra ER, but it's going to depend on what weapon you're using. For weapons, first we're going to look at this event weapon, which is this polearm during the Mizuki event. This is going to give her energy recharge, which is great, but it's also going to increase her attack by 40%, which is phenomenal because we want to get as much attack on Iansan as possible, because that is what her buff does. It's how her buff is going to work. Now, some other options that you can use, funny enough, Engulfing Lightning is very, very good for her because it's going to give her energy recharge. And then it's also going to increase her attack based on her energy recharge. So you can actually build her full ER with this weapon. And then I believe an ER Sands as well, that will then convert it all into attack for her. So that way we're going to be increasing her attack and her energy recharge. So that way she'll be able to just use it a ton. You do have some other options besides like Calamity Queller and Skyward Spine. You do have Favonius, which is always a good one. You do have the Catch, which can be good for ER. At that point, you'd still be running an attack stance. And then, of course, you have Prototype Star Glitter. You have some other options, but you need to make sure that you're getting some ER on her, as well as getting up a bunch of attack. And I think that I'm going to keep this event weapon on her. I really like the look of it. And this is kind of sitting around, not necessarily on anybody. I do believe that this was kind of designed to be used as a great option for Iansan. So I'm most likely just going to be keeping this on her regardless. Now, in the background, I am running this Veressa, Farina, Shin, Yoon, Iansan team kind of going around. This Veressa is level 20 out of 40 with really not many great artifacts. This Veressa behind me is actually level 20 with level 1 talents. So the fact that she's hitting this much and getting a great attack buff from Iansan is very, very good. This, I believe, is actually going to be one of Veressa's I believe that this team is actually one of Veressa's premier hyper carry teams, which is crazy that I'm actually able to run it. My Iansan is C5. Unfortunately, I'm not able to get her C6 before the banner ends because I've done pulling. But even with constellations, Iansan just gets better and better and better. Of course, C6 is going to be phenomenal on Iansan. I didn't really talk about the constellations in this video. I might do another one later on kind of talking about the constellations. But that is going to be it for this video. Kuki has green hair, I have green hair, and I will pink hair in real life, and I'll see you in the next one.